I mispronounce scientific words or use them incorrectly. As was unfortunately mentioned here, it was my birthday today. And I did expect a few of you to say happy birthday to me. I'm really touched though that you guys brought 8 tables worth of birthday gifts for me. Yeah. That's just absolutely wonderful and beyond. Mark, dude, if I give you my keys, can you start loading it up in my car for me? Yeah. I'd appreciate it.
As much as you can carry in one trip.
Oops, that's not good. Chris just reminded me, you sure you've got your cell phones turned off or turned on to vibrate?
Yeah. I've done that.
Well, you don't want to be disturbed?
No. Your cell phone goes off, you're the new president.
And lastly, I've got about 90 slides to go through here in about an hour, so I'm going to try to go through them quickly. So if I'm going too quick, raise your hand or say something. We can slow down, spend a little bit more time on the slide. If I'm going too slowly, feel free to fall asleep and start snoring. Once I hear 2 or 3 people snoring, I'll take the hint and start speaking. First off, I want to thank a few people. I obviously don't have photos of all these different shrimp. So we, Alyssa, Aiden, and Shawn at SCAPE gave me permission to do some of their photos and videos, as well as Nick at Speedy Aquatics, one of the big shrimp importers. Misc, who's also a big shrimp importer, and Silene, who is one of the moderators over at Shrimp Now and owns his own dedicated shrimp blog. So these guys all gave me permission to use their photos, and I really appreciate it. Cool. So, yes, sir?
Isn't that a girl?
Who?
Miss Jake?
That's a girl, yes. It's a mom with a huge mohawk.
Rachel, yeah.
Yeah, Rachel. So, why dwarf shrimp? From my point of view, a big thing on this is that they're beautiful. They're really nice to look at. They've got nice bright colors. If you're running a planted tank, you do a good job of keeping the tank clean. Since one of the problems with a planted tank is you can't vacuum the tank. So they actually help consume some of the mold, some of the other waste in your tank. They also help keep certain types of algae down. A mono shrimp and red-nosed shrimp are really good at eating hair algae. Some of the other shrimp are good at eating other types of algae. But one of the big things is there's a wide range of challenge. And I know a lot of people in the hobby, that's one of the things they're looking for is a certain level of challenge. You can start off with something small like a cherry shrimp, which basically requires no effort and no care whatsoever. As long as you keep them wet, they're going to be breeding and populating your tanks. Meanwhile, if you're really into things, you can get as difficult as you want to. Some of the Taiwan Bees shrimp require very exacting standards in the tank, very specific narrow ranges of water parameters, or else they'll die. If you get into the genetic side of things, I think shrimp are sort of taking the place for the younger generation, taking the place of guppies, as far as something that people are breeding specifically to create new lines, new visual traits, new combinations. That's an area that's really taking off. So depending on what you're looking for in your aquarium, there's a type of shrimp just for you and a type of shrimp care that's available to give you just that level of challenge you want. So just a little bit about the state of the hobby. Keeping dwarf shrimps has been really popular in Asia, particularly Japan, for a number of years. However, in America, shrimp haven't always been that far around. Really, globally and in the US in particular, it was really kicked off by Takeshi Amano. He published a book in the US in 1994 covering his nature-style aquariums. And one of the things in there that he focused a lot on was a shrimp, now called an Amano shrimp, that he used to help keep algae under control in those tanks. I remember working at a pet store back when that book came out and being just blown away by the types of tanks he was keeping and by these wonderful algae-eating shrimp. And we spent a huge amount of time going through our different distributors trying to find somebody that had a mono shrimp or some other shrimp available. And at that time, the only thing we could get was ghost shrimp, which were sold as feeders. There was nowhere near the range of shrimp that are available today in the United States. To this day, the most expensive, finest grade, rare shrimp are sold in Japan. That is the first market. So if you're a shrimp breeder, that's where you sell your expensive one-off stock. You'll pay up to $2,000 for a single shrimp if you've got the right characteristics. Beyond that, Taiwan, China, specifically food shrimp, and Germany are where most of the new strains are coming out of and where a lot of the everything comes out of it as far as the hobby goes. So it makes things kind of difficult to follow because you're dealing with Mandarin, Japanese, and German blogs and information sites and having to deal with rough translations to try to understand what's going on the cutting edge of the hobby. There are constantly new strains and variations appearing. Just in the last year, and we'll touch on some of them, there's been several new ones that have come out. And there's been several major changes in the U.S. on dealing with something like crystal red shrimp, what people look for in the hobby and how that has changed just in the last year is quite amazing. Another problem we run into is scientists haven't spent a lot of time categorizing these wild shrimp. Part of it's because a lot of these are coming out of China, which hasn't allowed Western scientists in to pay much attention, but even out of India and other places, there's really not much documentation, so there's questions on what constitutes different actual species of shrimp. They're all certainly similar, and then you've also got issues where there's disagreement or misinformation in the hobby, where some shrimp go under 2 or 3 different scientific names. To compound that, if you're buying your shrimp from a non-shrimp specific distributor, like one of the guys that primarily sells fish, they're normally located in Singapore, Vietnam, places like that, where they're including shrimp, you'll see when you go through the list, you'll see a common name, which you know, and you'll see a scientific name, which you know, but the scientific name and the common name don't match. So the question is, when you order these, which shrimp are going to come in? And I've personally seen this, that when those shrimp come in, they're a third type of shrimp. It's neither the common name nor the scientific name that was given. So that leads to just that much more confusion when you walk into a fish store and see something labeled crystal red shrimp, and it's actually an Indian banded shrimp, which looks nothing like a crystal red. And then people get those home, they grade them, and then before you know it, they're selling them under the wrong name, and it just leads to that much more confusion. So today I'm going to try to focus on 5 different categories of shrimp. Cherry shrimp, bee shrimp, tiger shrimp, Sulawesi shrimp, which are very new, and just the generic others, other dwarf shrimp that people are keeping that you'll see in stores that don't really fit these other categories. So just a brief bit on the anatomy. You've basically got, let's see if this works, you've got the head here, the thorax, the carapace, whatever you want to call it. We've got the abdomen or tail. You've got the rostrum, which is something that's often used to differentiate the different species. You look at that. You've got a couple of antennae on the top. Some species are very short, some are very long, which they use to sort of keep track of their surroundings while they're feeding. And then you've got little swimmerets on the bottom, which is how they swim around the tank. It's also where they carry their eggs. You've got walking legs down here. You've got what are called cheilipeds, which are these 2 here, which are the arms that are used basically as hands. These are what you'll see them picking things up with, digging in the dirt with. And then they've got little maxillipeds here, which are what they actually hold the food and shovel it into their mouth or hold it while they actually digest it. So the shrimp grow by a kind of an interesting method is the molt. I'm sure most of you are kind of familiar with the idea. But what happens is they essentially, as they get bigger, they grow a new, bigger version of themselves inside their current size cells. And then once they've grown and they're ready, they'll rip a hole between the head and the tail and pull their new larger self out through that, leaving behind, whoops, a little shell behind it. Now a lot of beginner shrimp keepers will find these in their tank and will panic thinking one of their shrimp died. Because here's a fully formed shrimp with antennae and legs and everything sitting there empty and dead. So no, that's the shell. So the way to tell the difference easily between the two is normally the result of the molt is going to be clear and transparent. Although sometimes if your shrimp dies and the other shrimp have been eating on them, you might just leave behind the shell too. The other thing to look for is the color. The shells are always going to be transparent regardless of what color shrimp you have. So if you see a bright pink or you still see the full colors, that's your dead shrimp. And it's very normal, regardless of the color of the shrimp, for them to turn pink if you've been sitting in your tank long enough. So one question that comes up is, okay, how do you grow a larger version of yourself inside your smaller self? And when they come out, I mean, you will see that they're noticeably larger than they were before. So we've got a quote from a world-renowned doctor as to how it works. They're bigger on the inside. Turns out they're a 5-dimensional being. The larger self is in another dimension we cannot see. Then when it's time and that other larger version is fully developed, You rip a hole in their shell, which opens up a gateway between the two dimensions, and the new larger version emerges. So here we have a video here showing a shrimp pulling itself out of its molt. You can sort of see how that works. And now what he's going to do now that he's fully out of his shell is he's going to probably find a quiet spot in the tank where he won't be bothered. Oftentimes he'll be hanging upside down or hanging off of this object as he lets his shell expand and absorb water to get to the full size, as well as then let it harden before he goes back out and starts adventuring again. So it's very normal for your shrimps to disappear for a few days before they molt, and then for a few days after they molt. There was a question?
Yeah, how often do they do that?
It depends on how fast they're growing and what you're feeding them. Once a month is pretty normal. However, if you change the water, or they're stressed for some reason, it's normal for them to molt due to that. One of the things that does happen with molting is a prime time for them to die. If they're already weak, something wrong, they're already stressed, the effort it takes to get out of that shell can normally be what puts them over the edge. Especially if they're stressed, they aren't developing properly underneath. They may find it difficult to break the outer shell if the water's, say, too hard and the shells become too hard, or it may stick to the old shell and they can't separate it. That stress normally will lead to them dying. It's also normal a couple days after they molt for them to die. Generally, it's not the molt itself necessarily that killed them. There was something already going on that was making them weak, and it was just the molt that pushed them over the edge. So some common traits when dealing with all the species of dwarf shrimp. So this applies to most of them when we're going through it. Generally, they've got about an 18-month lifespan. Some a little longer, some a little less. Water temperature will also affect it. Generally, the warmer the water, the shorter the lifespan. Size-wise, most of the dwarf shrimp we're talking about are maximum size 1.5 inches. Some of them are maximum about 1 inch. Most of the shrimp like cooler temperatures. They come from fast-moving streams in mainland China up in the hills, so they have very similar to a hill stream type environment. They tend to do best in cooler water. They're scavengers by nature. Many of them eat algae. A lot of them, though, their primary diet is the biofilm in your tank. And that's what they're getting most of their nutrition from, especially the baby shrimp. They're extremely sensitive to copper, ammonia, and nitrite. So if you have a tank that's already in existence and you've once treated it with some sort of copper-based treatment, not a good idea to put most of your shrimp in there. Even if it's been months since the copper treatment, there's enough of that copper that's adhered to the silicone in your tank or to the other surfaces in the tank that could result in your shrimp dying. Ammonia and nitrite, super sensitive, much more sensitive than a fish is. So you want to make sure your tank is fully cycled before you add any shrimp into it. When it comes to reproduction, all the shrimp are going to carry eggs on their abdomen. And then when those eggs are ready to hatch, there's two different types of shrimp. One type of shrimp, the eggs will hatch and fully formed baby shrimp will come out. It's normally referred to as benthic. And they'll immediately drop and move into the substrate, the dirt at the bottom of the tank, dark corners, and they'll spend the first couple of weeks hiding out of sight. They've molted a few times and gotten big enough and brave enough to venture out where you can see them. The other type is a larval stage. The larval stage shrimp are normally shrimp that live at the lower end of the rivers and streams. So when the eggs hatch, they're a larval form, which gets washed out into the bay, where they'll either grow up in pure salt water or in a brackish system. And then as they grow and go through multiple larval stages, they'll eventually work their way back upstream into the fresh water. Most types of shrimp have sexual dimorphism we'll go through, and most of the ones in the trade are native to Southeast Asia. There's a question in the back.
Yeah, if you've got current in the tank, you said they like the stream style, does that get in the way of the live shrimp going to the bottom of the tank? Like, can they fight a current, or when they're...
So they're used to these fast-moving streams, but for most of their life, they're spending time hiding behind rocks and other areas where the actual current is low. If you have too much current in the tank, the shrimp may have difficulty moving around. They might die from stress. But you can have a decent amount of current in there. You can have enough, like in a typical planet tank, you want enough current so all the plant leaves are slightly swaying in the water.
So
that's fine.
They're just looking for the current to deliver them food, essentially, as opposed to because they want to be in a stream. Like
the stream thing is actually, at least when it comes to keeping them, has to do with the oxygen levels. And we'll get to that a little bit later when we're talking about them. So this one I show here is a green shrimp. You can see the eggs here on their abdomen. Most of the species, you can see the eggs. It generally, for most species, is 28 days from the time you see the eggs to when they're ready to hatch. a little close-up shot here of some cherry shrimp. You can see the little eyes on the eggs, letting you know that the eggs are getting ready to hatch. So sexual dimorphism. Up in the top here, we've got a male cherry shrimp. On the bottom here, we've got 2 different female shrimp. So one of the things you'll notice, most of the shrimp, this is true of tigers and crystals, is the males tend to have a much smaller stomach area here, where the females tend to get a much thicker one. The females tend to be physically larger than the males. And if they're a type of shrimp that's sort of translucent, you can generally see on the females the eggs being developed up here on their back. And they'll stay there until the shrimp molts, at which point the eggs will move down onto their stomach when they mate. So first category here is going to be cherry shrimp. And when we get to the end of the cherry shrimp slides, I'll stop for questions. And any questions specifically about cherry shrimp, we can ask at that time. So this is a nice, beautiful, bright red cherry shrimp. What this actually is, though, this is the grandfather of the cherry shrimp. This is what they look like in the wild. So all of the current cherry shrimp we have descended from shrimp that look like this. So a few years ago, it's believed to be in Taiwan, but it seems to be kind of fuzzy as to who did it. Someone saw some red mutations, ended up breeding just the red and developing a line of red shrimp. So generally they're called red cherry shrimp. If you see them online, they're often abbreviated RCS for red cherry shrimp. People also refer to them as water cockroaches, simply because of how difficult it is to kill these guys and how quickly they reproduce. So if you're just starting off in shrimp and you want to sort of get your toes wet, cherry shrimp is a good place to start. If you can't keep these guys alive, you're really doing something wrong. You certainly don't want to move up to more expensive shrimp. These cherry shrimp are part of the Neocaridina series of shrimp. When we're talking about Neocaridina, they're all able to interbreed. So as a general rule, you don't want to keep different colorations or different strains together. In the past, when you would mix different Neocaridina color strains, and they would breed, you would end up with brown offspring that looks like that original ugly sort of brown shrimp. These days, that's not quite the case. Some of the strains out there have finally managed to breed the brown genes out entirely. So if you throw different colors together, oftentimes the babies will be the different colors, at least for the first couple generations. Temperature-wise, they'll survive temperatures down to 55 degrees. I've had them in colder weather when we had the cold snap on my outdoor tanks, and most of them survived. They won't be breeding at that temperature, but they lived and they were moving and eating. And they can take temperatures up into the mid-80s. Ideally, you want them somewhere in the upper mid-70s is where they do best. 74 to 76 is a really good target to try to shoot for. pH, ideally, question?
Your tanks you're seeing had a cold snap, so that means you're not heating your tanks at all.
No, these are outdoor tanks, no filtration, sitting outside on my porch. So when it got cold this winter, when it got windy, the temperatures in the tank dropped really, really cold at the end. pH-wise, it can handle a wide range of pH. Ideally, though, they like a harder pH and alkaline, or harder water and alkaline pH. That's what they generally do best in. They love Southern California tap water. They will thrive in it. They will breed like crazy. So there's nothing special you need to do with the water. And depending on the type of color that you go with, they cost anywhere from like 50 cents to $3 a piece. To give you an idea of just how hardy these guys are, I have them in a 3-gallon tank with a beta. This tank has aqua soil, it has a few plants in it. pH is generally around 6.4, which is at the lower end where they're not supposed to breed. It's not supposed to be good for their shells. You've got a beta honey. I threw 2 or 3 cherry shrimp culls in there for him to eat. That was a few months ago. Since that time, the shrimp in there have buried up, the babies have hatched, and they've now grown up into full-size adults, despite the beta, despite the poor water conditions, despite the lack of filtration. They're doing good. So grading guide, we've got a couple different grades. There's some disagreement of where exactly the cutoffs are between these, but generally you've got the cherry grade, which has got sort of a speckled red appearance. The males sometimes will be clear with maybe little teeny tiny red stripes you can just barely see. The next grade up are the Sakura shrimp, which have a much more red coloration on the females. Males may or may not have that coloration. Next up is fire red, Taiwan fire red, which gives you a nice, solid, deep, dark, non-transparent, red shell that covers all of the body. Males may be more Sakura grade than the fire red. Originally, fire red and Taiwan fire red were two different strains of these red shrimp that come out of different breeders. Unfortunately, they've been mixed. The names have been jumbled about, so you can't tell really where your shrimp are coming from. With one kind of exception, there's one importer, Speedy, who's importing in a specific line of fire red cherry shrimp, which he calls Supreme Reds. But for the most part, you don't know exactly what you're getting. And then the highest grade is painted fire red. The main difference between fire red and painted fire red is the legs are solid red, where with the normal fire red, the legs tend to be transparent or speckled.
And they are, what kind of price for that end?
Painted fire reds online, I've seen them going for $3 to $4, sometimes even less. A year ago, painted fire reds were going for $5 or $6, so they've been dropping. Even at stores, I've seen them in pet stores going for $3.
If you don't cull, will the fire reds revert back to the lower grades?
Yeah, you constantly have to cull your offspring if you want to maintain the color in your line. Even the higher end ones will throw off lower grades, and if you let them stay in the tank and reproduce, the lower grade genes will spread. So how to take care of cherry shrimp? What do you need? Something that holds water. Doesn't have to be a fish tank, doesn't have to have a filter, doesn't have to have a heater, just needs to hold some water. And then you might want to give them some food. All of your shrimp, regardless of which ones we're talking about today, will eat blanched leaves. They're particularly fond of mulberry leaves, but there's other types of leaves you can use. They tend to like veggies, spinach, romaine lettuce, zucchini, cucumber. Blanch them for a minute or so in boiling water. Throw them in some ice to cool them, and they'll chow down on that. There's commercial fish foods available, or shrimp foods. Some are ridiculously expensive, 4 ounces for $20. In the case of cherries, as long as the tank's been around a while, you can get away with nothing. Going back to my beta tank, there was no shrimp food in there. I feed my beta 3 little beta pellets, which he eats. So the only thing he had to eat in there was algae that grows, biofilm, and beta waste. Same with my outdoor tank. I never fed my outdoor tank. All he had in there was algae. So color variants. So again, all these are cherry shrimp, and generally you want to keep them separate. If you're planning on selling the offspring, please keep them separate. Even if they don't throw out browns anymore, it's still, people want to know what they're buying is yellow, and when they breed it, they're going to get yellow, not that they're going to breed yellow and get an orange offspring or something. So first one is yellow cherry shrimp. There's 2 different grades. There's a regular yellow, which is sort of a pale yellow, and there's the new fire red, which gives you a lot more deep yellow color. There's a neon yellow shrimp, also called golden backs or fire yellow neon shrimps. These come out of Germany. These were introduced into the hobby, I think I put it on there. Apparently I didn't. They were introduced in the hobby just a few years ago. These guys still go for a lot of money. These guys go for $8 to $12 a piece. Similar to your yellow shrimps, the difference is the body is a little bit more deep yellow, more like a mustard yellow instead of a bright yellow, and then they've got this racing stripe down their back. Both the males and the females should have both the stripe and that sort of coloration. Also, the females on the neon yellows tend to be larger than the normal cherry shrimp females by a little bit. Pumpkin shrimp, this is something that really took off in the last year. There were originally at least 2 different names for them. There was pumpkin shrimp and there was Sakura, orange shrimp. The Sakuras tended to be a sort of a lighter color, and the pumpkins tended to be a darker color. But again, you've got people selling both under either or name. So pumpkin no longer necessarily means a nice deep orange. Sakura no longer means sort of a lighter orange. It's just there. Chocolate shrimp. And I got the cost wrong over there, my apologies. Those actually tend to go for a lot. They tend to go for about $12. These guys go from anywhere from sort of a brownish orange to a really deep brown. It's almost black. These come out of Germany, which is why you also sometimes see them referenced in Schoko, I think I pronounced it right, Schoko shrimp, which means chocolate in German. Smurf cherries. These are something I'm currently working on. I didn't originate these, but there's only one seller of these, and he hasn't been selling any for months now. These were a mutant strain that came out of fire reds. What they do is they give you a sort of like a fire red shell, but it's blue. The photos don't really show it, because the photos sort of The light goes through them, but when you see them in person, you don't get that sort of translucent effect. It looks just as solid as a normal fire red. You can see one here that's not quite as well lit up. It's a lot darker than the one that's got the light directly shining on them. I'm currently calling them Smurf cherries. The originator just called them, he called them Teenage Mutant Blue Cherry, which is kind of hard to say. I think Smurf is a lot easier to pronounce and quicker to say. Hopefully at some point I'll have enough of these that I'll actually go start selling them. The adults I got haven't done too well in my tank, but the babies seem to be doing well. So hopefully they'll get old enough, they'll start breeding, and eventually I'll have a large enough colony I can sell some off. Really shrimp. No disagreement of the name, Really or Riley. The good news is we're both wrong. They come out of Taiwan just 2 years ago. In 2010 is when the first ones showed up. This photo here is what the first ones look like. So they're a mutation of the red cherry. They came from Mr. Wang in Taiwan. Let me try to say it. The Chinese name for it is Liuli, and it was mistranslated to R-I-L-I, which is where the English Really or Riley name comes from. So Liuli is the proper name, and it's named after this type of Chinese art that's based on glass and wax. And you can sort of see how it has, the deeper colors and the translucent bits, similar to the shrimp. So these are the originals and what the originally looked like. These days, a proper high-grade Really shrimp looks like this. You've got a nice solid red on the tail, nice solid red on the head, and a clear midsection. A year ago, these were going for $8 online, stores even more. Today, people are blowing them out online for 50 cents. Dramatic price drop. And that'll be a trend you'll see in shrimp. So up next was the blue Really shrimp. These originally came out, I believe, beginning of 2011. So similar look to them, but with a blue midsection. So these were going for like $15 at one point. And since then, some different color variations have come out. You've got a full blue Really, which are really hard to find. Instead of red on the tail and on the head, you've got deep blue color on the head and on the tail, and then still the translucent blue body. And then you've got these guys. These are what were originally considered low grade. There's a specific strain called Blue Velvet, which is from a specific breeder in Taiwan. But all of the low grade blue Reallys look like this. Basically entirely translucent body. It may have a few specks of red, or like this guy here, a little bit of blue on the tail or on the head, but for the most part they're translucent. These have replaced all the other grades in the hobby. It's next to impossible to find the original, this type of blue Really. It's just ridiculously hard to find now. We've moved to these guys. These guys, when these first came out, 6 months ago maybe, when you first started seeing them, they were going for like $6. You can get them online now for less than $1 a piece. Pet stores are still around $5, $6, but online, 50 cents a buck for the low grade ones. If you can find the high grades, $8 to $12, but I've been looking and I can't find a reliable source. Going forward, we're going to a different type of Neocaridina. So far, everything we've been talking about was Neocaridina heteropoda, offspring and variants that have come about from that original brown shrimp. So there's another type of Neocaridina called palmata. So these have a couple different color variation. There's one you no longer see in the hobby, which is sort of a translucent body with orange in the middle section. They didn't reproduce true, and after some study, what was found was that those orange in the middle wasn't internal organs or coloration. It was cysts from a parasite, but didn't reproduce in the tank. So there's something in the ecosystem that eats the shrimp that the cysts then hatch in their stomach and spread it. I haven't seen one explain what that is. So you don't see those very often. What you see most often, and you'll see these at a lot of pet stores, is blueberry shrimp. Sometimes they're called blue shrimp, sometimes they're called blackberry. They're nice blue colors. Some are light blue, some are very deep, almost black. The problem you have with these is they don't breed true. The coloration is from something in their wild environment when they're captured wild. They aren't bred in captivity, they're all wild caught. So their offspring do not get the blue color, and over time as they molt, they'll lose the blue color. You can try feeding them certain shrimp foods that do have blue food coloring in them, and it may help. And they've been around for a number of years in the hobby. They were one of the first shrimps in the hobby, the first blue shrimp that really caught on. So because of that, even as much as early as like a year ago, people were still arguing and saying there was no such thing as a blue shrimp that bred true, simply because of the damage these guys did by not breeding true. Other variations, blue pearl. Now, until maybe 6 months ago, these were considered a different type of Neocaridina, but they did genetic studies and found out that they were palmadas. I would tell you the old name, but it's Chinese and filled with X's and Y's and I's, and I have no idea how to say it. So all of these palmadas, basically the same care as a Neo, maybe not quite as hardy, but pretty close. So these guys are a translucent blue color, may have some little red specks on them. It's very easy to confuse these with that all blue ribbon. The primary way to tell them apart is to look at the eggs or look at the saddle, which is what they call the eggs when they're growing on the back and you haven't dropped down yet. Blue pearls will have these dark colored eggs, whereas the blue rillies will have either yellow or bright green eggs. That's the easiest way to tell them apart. Then there's also what are called snowball shrimp. In my mind, a very boring shrimp. They're sort of a translucent white, not much coloration, don't stand out, until they get buried and have eggs. Their eggs are a nice, brilliant white color, hence the name snowball shrimp. Okay, so that's it for Neocaridina shrimp, or cherry shrimp. Does anyone have any questions before I move into bees? No?
They're all an inch and a half range?
Yes, they're all about an inch and a half. Yes, sir.
Now, will the palmadas crossbreed with the caridinas?
Yes. So, for your tank, a general rule, just in general, in dealing with these shrimps is you can try to keep different types of shrimp together, but try to keep them from different species types. The trick will be trying to balance the water parameters to make everybody happy. Usually one type of shrimp will do better in whatever the conditions are and will reproduce faster. But what you'll normally do is you'll choose one type of Neocaridina for your tank. You'll choose one type of bee shrimp for your tank. Then you might throw in one type of Indian shrimp for your tank. Some of the other shrimps that don't reproduce in fresh water, like sun-kissed orange shrimp or something like that. So you can have a lot of different colors and types of shrimp. You just have to be careful not to mix the species. Another question?
What about community tanks? Like I have outdoor ponds. I have like 4 ponds.
Okay, so good question. He was asking about putting the shrimp in a community tank. The answer is a good, solid maybe. Particularly the Neos, if you're going to do it, Neos are a good one to do it with because they reproduce so fast. Depends on what type of fish you have in there. All fish, regardless of how small they are, will eat baby shrimp, with the exception of the auto catfish, which is like a pure vegetarian fish. It's the only fish that's known of that will not eat the baby shrimp. So having said that, if you've got lots of plants or hiding spaces, it is absolutely possible. I've got a 20-gallon tank at home. It's got full-size mollies in it, it's got platies in it, it's got guppies in it, it's got some catfish in it, and my cherries still managed to breed at a fast enough rate that they've never hit 0. So it is absolutely possible to do it, but it just depends what's in there. Obviously, an Oscar or something's going to eat them up.
Keep a separate tank. This is the best suggestion. That way you can feed it.
Any other questions before I move? One more. Yes, sir.
Because they're eating waste and algae,
Yes, they taste horrible because of that. Don't do it.
what about cleaning the tank and water? How often do you have to do water changes?
On the cherries, it's up to you. You don't have to. Like those tanks outside, I don't do water changes. I just top it off with tap water. It's probably rock hard water at this point. Okay, so we're going to move forward here to bee shrimp. So bee shrimp, most of you are familiar probably with the crystal red shrimp. These have been the hot, in-demand shrimp for the last several number of years, going for all sorts of money, and they still kind of deal. The difference is these guys are a lot harder to take care of. So you have to be very careful about what sort of water you put them in, what sort of tank setup you have. This is what they look like in the wild. This is what they come from in China. So this is what the crystal reds came from. This gentleman here, I don't know how to say his name, Hisasu Suzuki, maybe? All the way back in 1993, he was breeding the wild bee shrimp. He noticed 3 that had a sort of red color mutation. All of the crystal red shrimp today are descended from those 3 red mutation shrimp. So he first saw these, I believe, in 1993, and then in 1996, he had stabilized the line, and he had gotten a patent on crystal red shrimp. and launched them into the market in 1996. So that's when they first hit. And this picture down here, this is what they look like when they first launched. So very different than that. But that's what they first came out with. He patented them, and when he launched them into the market, he had something like 3,000 of them ready to go. So in 3 years from first mutation showing up to having 3,000 breeding, mostly true. He himself, his main job was actually working in a sushi bar in Japan. He did the breeding the shrimp sort of hobby. There was a question?
Yeah, that went over my head. What did he get out of patenting the shrimp? If somebody bought him and they started breeding, what did that do for him?
I think it probably scared people off for the first 3 days.
Yeah.
Before they started breeding their own. But I mean, he did get a patent. He tried to monopolize it. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the pockets of Monsanto to go after anybody else that happens to get wild growing that have their genes. So this is what they tend to look like today. They're called crystal red shrimp, or CRS when you see them online, not to be confused with RCS, which are your red cherry shrimp. For some reason, some of the breeders in Singapore started calling them diamond shrimp, but most people still stick with the original and give it to them, crystal red. Temperature range. These guys like colder water, and these ones are really particular about oxygen content. In the wild, they're in these streams in China. There is no mineral content in them. So when you have them, you want to keep the pH under 7. You want to have a KH of 0 ideally, and you want to have a GH somewhere in the 3 to 5 range. You need just that little bit of calcium in the water to help them with their shell development. Too little calcium in the water, their shells will develop properly. Much more than that, they'll have problems molting because their shells will get too hard. And we'll get into it a little bit here. I'll talk about how to set up a tank for these guys. Cost, even today, anywhere from $3 up to $1,800 in Japan, up to $950 in the US. And I'll show you some of the differences there. Grading is kind of complicated, and there's lots of specific strains. Again, a year ago, you went out and you bought crystal red shrimp, a certain grade. Today, you have crystal red shrimp and you have all these different strains. Maybe you want a Benibachi, maybe you want this or that. And you have different types of grading now too. Some of the individual breeders coming up with their own grading. And to confuse it even more, they use the same grades, but just for different things. So an SSS shrimp from one strain might be different than an SSS shrimp from another. There's a black variant. This is actually the first sort of wild genes. If you have red, crystal reds, you will get occasional black babies out of them because the gene is still there. You can absolutely keep black with red shrimp in your tank, although you'll get more black offspring than red. Everything else is pretty much the same. So here's the main guy. This has been the way people graded shrimp for the longest time. It was basically based on the amount of white. So at the low end, you had the C grade, which barely had any white at all. It looked kind of like those original shrimp from 1996. And then you go all the way up to SSS, which are just a little tiny bit of red. And then on top of that, there are different names for the different patterns that the stripes show up. So on the higher end shrimp, this becomes a burden. And on these names are still used on most of the specific other Japanese style breed that's now become popular. So just to give you an idea here are Benibachi crystal red shrimp, to give you an idea on price. This guy here is considered A grade or a really low grade, even though they have tons of white. By the old chart, these would be SS or an SSS. They're A by Benibachi. You go for 65 bucks each. If you want a good quality SSS, $950 in America just 2 months ago. There's none available right now because these sold out, and they're not shipping any more in until the temperature's dropping. For comparison, here's a nice SSS that you can get from Nick at Speedy Shrimp, Speedy Aquatics. $11.50 for this guy versus $950 here. So I ask you, when you look at that, you see $940 worth of difference in the coloration and pattern. It's in the eyes of the beholder. So if you want a little bit extra white on the legs, maybe a little bit deeper white, there you go. So let's talk about some of the terms you'll see also. One of the big terms you'll see these days, which again really sort of took off in the last year, is PRL, pure red line, or PBL, pure black line. There's some misunderstanding on that. Some people are under the mistaken impression if you buy a pure red line and you breed them, you're only going to get red offspring. Or you buy a pure black line, you're only going to get black offspring. That's incorrect. The pure is referencing whether they have any golden bee shrimp blood in them. A lot of the breeders, particularly in Taiwan, to get to that SSS grade with the light sort of white color pattern or coverage, took these golden bee shrimp, which are entirely white with sort of a yellowish cast and kind of blotchy, and mixed them in. So people don't want that because you might get a little yellowish tint on your shrimp, or because the whites might not be as good as a pure red line. So pure red lines have no golden blood in them. You still might get some black offspring from your pure red. You might still get some red offspring from your pure black, just for the sake of wild mutation that might show up. But it is there. So there's different strains. Zin, Kang Sheng, who's here locally, is one of the SCAPE members. Benny Bachi from Japan, K14 from Germany, EB10 is Japan, Crimson, 35 Shrimp from Thailand, and there's pure black strains as well, like Black Impact. Benny Bachi has some. Most of these other guys have some black strains too. So now you're saying, okay, I bought some pure red line, I paid through the nose for them. Are these really pure red line? The only way to test this, and it's not that hard of a test, it just takes time, is go out there and buy yourself some golden bee shrimps, take one of your male crystal reds, put them in a tank with a female golden. Do the opposite, take one of your female crystal reds, put them in a tank with a male golden, let them breed, and check the offspring. All of the offspring should be crystal red. The golden bee trait is a recessive trait. So the only way it's going to show up is if your shrimp have that golden bee trait in them. So if both of them manage to breed, both sets of babies are entirely crystal red, you don't have any golden blood with your shrimp. Bee tank setup. So soft, acidic water. You are not going to be able to get by with using tap water in most cases. There are a few strains that do kind of okay, but for the most part, what you're going to want to do is soft, acidic water. So you're going to want to use RO water. Spend $100, $150, buy your own RO system, make it at home, or get some buckets, go down to your local fish store, go to the corner water store, go to your supermarket where they've got those automated RO machines, get the water from there. So that's going to get you water that's basically almost pure water. It's not quite distilled water purity, but it's close enough. That'll get you a KH of 0, and that'll get you a GH of 0. So what you're going to want to do then is you're going to want to add some more minerals back into the water. So there's lots of shrimp-specific stuff you can buy, some of it very expensive to do this. You can use cyclic conditioner, you can use SeaChem Replenish, any of those things will raise your GH. You want something that's going to raise GH while keeping TDS down. Some stuff like Kent's RO Right will raise GH, but it shoots the TDS up really high. And the water then becomes has too much dissolved solids for the shrimp to like. Okay, so now you've got the balance. Some of these shrimp, some of the strains, especially the higher quality ones, because they're so inbred, they're really sensitive. Some of these guys do much better in water with a pH of 6. So the way to help get the pH down is to add Indian almond leaves, alder cones, or you can buy supplements of fulvic acid that you add to the water to help lower the pH. The next thing you're going to need is a buffering substrate. Now, you've got water that's got a KH of 0. So there's no carbonate hardness in there, which means there's 0 buffering capacity. The unfortunate thing with that is your pH can shoot way up and way down in a matter of minutes, because it doesn't take much contaminants to cause the pH to shift around. So the way you get around that, since you don't want to add carbonate into the water, you don't want to raise your KH, is you buy a substrate that offers buffering capability. The gold standard for years in keeping these shrimp has been ADA Amazonia aqua soil. Put it in your tank, and it's going to buffer to around 6.4, 6.5. There are other brands now in the market in the U.S. Shrimp Sand, Yabao, Mr. Aqua Soil, all of these are suitable replacements. Which one you use and which one you like depends on who you talk to. People have different preferences and favorites. There's one substrate out there, Fluval Shrimp Substrate, which claims to do this. Don't buy it. The Fluval stuff, some of it works really good, some of it doesn't. There's no quality control, there's no consistency. So somebody will buy some Fluval substrate, it'll do a great job buffering to 6.5. Somebody like me will buy some and it'll buffer to 7.2. So I would recommend staying away from it, but any of these other ones are good. Some of them, like Yabao, actually keep the pH down around 5.5. So they're really good primarily for some of the other Taiwan bees we'll talk about. One other thing to keep in mind with all of these substrates, if they're buffering, chances are they're leaching ammonia into the water. And they'll leach ammonia for the first month to 2 months. So what you need to do to get through that is frequent water changes until it stops leaching ammonia into the water. ADA, the official recommendation for ADA in setting up a new tank is 100% water changes every day for the first week. 100% water changes every other day for the second week. And then slowly going down and down from there until the ammonia stops. So that's from the 88 guidebook on how to deal with their tank and deal with the ammonia in the soil. You're great if you want to plant plants. Plants don't mind ammonia. Some of them love ammonia. So you can put plants in there, you just can't have any livestock. You need good filtration. For most of these guys, just a sponge filter is probably good enough, especially in a smaller tank. Some people get ridiculous with their filtration, stringing multiple canister filters together. If you are going to go with a canister filter or a hob type filter, you need to put a sponge or some other strainer on the intake. Otherwise, the baby shrimp will get sucked inside the filter. In the case of like the hardier shrimp like Cherries, I have an Eheim 2211, which is a canister filter with no baskets. Just all the media is in there. So I went to clean my canister filter. I dumped it out into a bowl. I rinsed everything out with water. I then was scooping the bio balls and stuff back out of that bowl to put back into the canister filter, and I found living baby shrimp. And they survived all that, got put back in the tank. And as far as I know, they grew up to be nice, healthy adults. So some of these guys are really healthy, really strong, but not a good idea for crystal reds. Especially if you're dropping $950 on each shrimp. That's a lot of money you're losing if you kill one. Surface agitation. This is important. A lot of times in your tanks, if you're using canister filtration, you do not have enough surface agitation, which doesn't allow the oxygen levels to get high enough. I talked before about them coming from sort of a hill stream environment. And this is where that comes into effect. Their water, in addition to being very pure and soft, is very high in oxygen content. And it's one of the biggest challenges you're going to have with these guys. If you're doing planet tanks with shrimp, one of the problems you run into is the CO2 causes the babies to die at a really young age. They don't seem to live as long. So good surface agitation for oxygen content. If you look at some of the Taiwan breeders, all of them will have multiple sponge filters in the tank, even if they're doing canister filters, simply for that surface agitation. They need moss in hiding places. So good idea is to put some Malaysian driftwood, which will also release tannins in the water, help lower pH. Add some Java moss, some Christmas moss, whatever type of moss. The moss creates a lot of surface area for biofilm to grow, so the shrimp have something to eat on, the baby shrimp have something to eat, and the baby shrimp have a place to hide until they feel comfortable coming out. And food is the same for cherry shrimp, veggies, leaves, commercial food. If you look at a lot of the professional breeders in Japan, specifically Benebachi, you'll see their tanks are a tank, buffering substrate, a piece of wood with some moss on it, and then they've got normally some sponge filters, and then they've got a canister filter, or not a canister filter, a true filtration system, sump or whatever, and they've got a spray bar going across the entire length of the tank, about 4 inches above the tank water, shooting the water into the tank. It's ridiculously loud, but it keeps the oxygen levels up, and when you're breeding shrimp that sell for $1,000 a piece, you want the maximum, offspring to grow and grow. So here is the Benebachi factory, and if you look closely, on most of these tanks, you'll be able to see the spray bars. If we had a sound hooked up, you'd hear just how ridiculously loud it is. So these are their show tanks. Most of these just have sponge filters, but look at all that surface agitation. Lots and lots of surface agitation. You can see the spray bar all the way across the tank right here. Now they're going to go back to where they actually do the breeding. Again, these are show tanks. This is where you come in and buy your shrimp. Now they're going to go back into where they actually breed the shrimp. And you can see the water dripping down several inches coming out of those spray bars to help keep that surface agitation up, keep the water pristine clean, keep the oxygen content levels up. Do you have to do that at home? If you're just breeding and keeping them for fun, no. But if you're trying to breed them for money, if you're looking for maximum survival rates in the offspring, yes, you do. So going forward, we have something, we have another shrimp here called a golden bee. I was telling you, this is what was mixed with crystal reds in the past in Taiwan to increase the white coverage area quickly. So they're a nice white shrimp. Normally they have a yellow coloration. If they have a pure white coloration, they're called snow whites. And some of them have this sort of lily type pattern, like the Neos, where they have a sort of translucent orange section in the middle and then the white on the head and tail. These are considered low grade. Highest grade is the pure white. These go for $4 to $8. So now Taiwan bees. Taiwan bees are interesting. They were introduced just in 2008. They came from Taiwan bee stock, although who actually invented them is still kind of up for debate. The first person to show off a stabilized line was Fu shrimp out of China. There had been random mutations like this. in German stock and other places, but no one had ever turned it into an actual line that breeds true. It's supposed to be, according to coon shrimp, the livestock itself that these came out of were a mix of crystal red, crystal black, and golden bee. So they've got genetics for all three in them. So first, we're going to deal with Taiwan bees. Generally the same way of keeping them as you do for crystal reds. They tend to be a little bit more picky about pH being low, a little bit more picky about the oxygen content. These days they go anywhere from $40 to $150 depending on the type. Like any of these shrimp, these were going for a lot more a year or two ago. So let's go through some of these. Yes, no? Apparently not.
Can you go faster?
Battery died. Just kidding.
I'm just trying to get to work. Okay, there we go. So the original Taiwan were a red and a ruby red. See, they look like sort of like a crystal shrimp, but the color is a lot different. It's a lot darker red. When these first launched, the wine red was considered high grade. The ruby red was considered low grade. Today, it's just the opposite. Everyone wants the least amount of white possible. But 2 years ago, everyone wanted the most amount of white. To show you how much the hobby's changed in 2 years. The other combination is Panda and Black King Kong. Again, Panda is more white. Black King Kong has mostly black and just a little white. And again, when these were launched, Pandas were considered the high grade and went for the most amount of money. Additional ones here is a Shadow Panda, which I want to get. These are really hard to find. Go for about 70 to 100 bucks for just the normal ones. There are some that go for 600 or 700 bucks. So it's a Panda, but instead of white, they get blue. However, the blue isn't consistent. As they molt, sometimes they'll turn back to white, and then they'll turn back to blue again. When we have a blue bolt, these go for 120, 150 bucks still today. These are a golden bee shrimp, but with that blue tint to them. You're only going to find these online. There's the blue jelly. So sometimes you will see the really shrimp called blue jelly. This was done by a German breeder specifically to take advantage of the fact that just before those hit Germany, someone had launched the blue jelly and was going like crazy. Everyone in the shrimp world was talking about this new blue jelly shrimp. So he called his really blue, really shrimp blue jellies to confuse people and take advantage of that confusion. These are out of Taiwan. I have never seen these offered available anywhere. Maybe I'm just not looking in the right places, but I've never seen them in the US. There's a Hulk shrimp, which is sort of a green and blue with a white stripe. And this slide's in the wrong place. It should have been before the Taiwan bees. This is not a Taiwan bee. This is similar to the wild bee shrimp. You will see these at a lot of stores, bumblebee shrimp. As best I can tell, it's a name that's applied to both wild bee shrimp and to anything that's been mixed. I think some of the breeders have thrown crystal reds, crystal blacks, and wild shrimp together, and you get the bumblebee. And the reason I say that, some look like this. I've found ones that are blue. This is the guy I had in my home. I found ones that are orange. Most of them are brown and black. I found some that look identical to crystal black shrimp, and you would have a hard time telling them apart. So that's why I'm thinking these, while they're called supposedly a wild-caught strain, I think it's a mix of genetics that you see turning up in stores. Same here as crystal red. Okay, that's it for bees. Any questions? Yes, sir?
And where do you get them shipped in from? Where do you get them from?
So most of these shrimp, you'll find most of the crystal reds, the goldens, almost all the neos in pet stores. There are stores up in San Gabriel Valley, A+, Fish, CK Fish World, Planetarium, Ocean Blue and Orange sometimes gets them in, sometimes doesn't. Even the Reef gets them in, and down here, Tongs gets them in, although they never seem to be the greatest quality as far as the health levels of the stock they get. You can see them at 405. Otherwise, online, SCAPE, Planet Tank, Aquabid, eBay, for some of the harder to find ones for the cheaper prices. Anything else? Okay, tigers. So these are also a Caridina. These guys will crossbreed with your bee shrimp. However, the offspring tend not to be fertile once you get a couple generations down. The first generation might be fertile. Second generation generally isn't. By the time you get to the fourth generation, they're almost never even fertile in their life. So the main one is a tiger shrimp. There's two grades. There's a regular tiger shrimp and there's a super tiger shrimp. These guys are almost entirely caught in the wild. So because of that, there is sort of a lower survival rate than they should have. They're similar to the crystal reds as far as care, but they tend to like the pH just north of 7, so slightly alkaline water. They also tend to like a little bit harder water. So for that reason, they're a good shrimp to keep also with your neos. You can mix RO water with tap water to get something that both of them tend to like. But because they're wild caught, survival rates aren't too great. I would recommend avoiding buying ones that are buried. Buried shrimp don't transport as well as non-buried, because when shrimp get stressed, part of the way of dealing with the stress is to molt. If they're carrying eggs, they will suppress that desire to molt to try to bring those eggs to term. And because of that, you'll often find them dying just a few days before the eggs finally would have hatched. So, and again, just because they're wild caught, I would suggest trying to avoid the buried, although when you go to a pet store and they're $2.50 each and there's a whole bunch of big fat buried ones, it's kind of hard to resist. They're caught in the wild in China, come in little swamps, little creeks, things like that. So the good grade is Super, which has nice, solid, thick black lines and may have some white highlighting. There is one importer who claims these Super as a grade is the incorrect term, that Super tigers are a specifically different species of tiger shrimp that looks almost exactly like this, that comes from a different source, and he claims to be the only guy that's ever imported them into the US. So most people will call this a Super tiger. If he's sitting around or on the same message board, he'll jump in to tell you you're wrong. But for the most part, the industry, this is a Super tiger. Orange-eyed blue tigers. So this is a variation of the tiger shrimp with a blue body, blue stripes, and orange eyes, hence orange-eyed blue tiger, or seen online, OEBT. I put the care here as it varies, and the reason for this is there are strains coming out of Germany that like hard water and hard alkaline water. There are strains coming out of Taiwan that like CRS conditions, soft acidic water. So you need to, whoever you're buying them from, you need to find out what sort of care or what sort of conditions they were bred in before you go and spend the money to make sure you're getting what you want. On the grading, there's the regular blue. There's also a blonde grade that looks almost exactly like a tiger shrimp except for the orange eyes. So blonde, blue, orange-eyed blue tigers can still give offspring that are blue. Blue offspring can still give you blondes. There are some breeders out there or importers that claim to have access to strains that are 100% blue. I don't have experience, so I can't vouch for it, but they are out there. The highest grade is this royal blue. So those go for about 25 bucks. And you can see there's almost no striping, it's just a deep, dark, solid blue body. There's also a red tiger shrimp. These come out of the regular Super tiger, tiger stock, same type of care conditions. These occur naturally. If you go somewhere that's selling tiger shrimp and they just got their shrimp in, you will see a few red ones mixed in. There is, though, a strain coming out of Germany that's entirely red, breeds true for the redness. So those generally go from $2 to $5, maybe more if you're getting some of the German ones. Black-eyed black tigers. So black eye, really thick stripes. I believe these are all, again, coming out of Germany. I don't believe these are a wild cuts variant. I believe these are a man-made variant. And again, because of that, check with the breeder and see what sort of water conditions they have before you buy them. Next up, black tiger orange eye. This is the offspring of the orange-eyed blue tiger mixed with that black-eyed black tiger. So this is what you get, a very dark black body with slightly darker black stripes and orange eyes. These generally go for about 20 bucks a piece. Again, check with your source to find out the water conditions they need. The last of the tigers I'm going to talk about is the tangerine tiger. These are actually a different species than all the other tigers. All the other tigers we've been talking about are the same species. This is Caridina serrata. It's a different species, and depending on who you ask, the water parameters they need tends to vary. It does seem like, though, they're a little bit more hardy than your typical tiger shrimp. They're almost always going to be captive bred, although these do occur in the wild. So again, check who you're getting them from to find out water conditions and where they're coming from. They're going to go for about 6 to 10 bucks online. There is another shrimp that came out last year that was really expensive. It came from Fu Shrimp in China, called an Aura Blue. Looks kind of like these guys, transparent body, but blue instead of orange. He has refused to say where these came from, other than they came from some sort of wild stock, and then he helped enhance the colors. He won't tell the species. There's a lot of speculation that these guys are also Caridina serrata, just a color morph of the tangerine tigers. He's never said anything that I'm aware of to straighten that out, so it's just speculation at the moment. Now, we also have a type of tiger called a Thai bee. As the name might imply, these are tigers that have been bred with your crystal red shrimps. And as I was talking before, the offspring can be really interesting color patterns, but they tend not to be fertile. F1s tend to be half fertile, and then as you get further and further down, they come to be less fertile. However, there are a number of German breeders right now working on Thai bee strains to try to create a consistent Thai bee strain for the coloration and that remains fertility. And from what I'm hearing, within the next 6 to 8 months, those will probably be hitting the market in Germany. So someone just through sheer willpower and doing it over and over again has finally got some Thai bee shrimp that are actually going to breed pure. In addition, just going back to the Taiwan Bees, there are other colorations that haven't really hit the US yet. There's a pinto shrimp. There's a crystal white, which is a white translucent body. The pinto shrimp has black-headed white spots or alternately red spots. So those are there. Any questions on tigers before we move on? Okay, let's keep going. Sulawesi shrimp. Sulawesi shrimp are coming out of Indonesia, from the Sulawesi Island, from the lakes in Sulawesi. Specifically the lakes. There are other shrimp in the hobby that come from Sulawesi, but not from the lakes. They were first imported into Germany in 2008. That's where all of our knowledge on them comes from. So they are believed to be ancestors of saltwater shrimp. Whereas the islands rose, water got captured into these deep, dark lakes, and they slowly adapted to the fresh water as it filled. The Sulawesi lakes are also where the Tylo shrimp, or Tylo snails come from, or those rabbit snails that we had a speaker a few months on. That's where those guys come from. Also, Sulawesi, not the lakes, but mainland is where the really colorful land crabs are, the vampire crab, some of the other crabs that are coming out of Sulawesi. So Sulawesi is famous for really nice coloration. So first up is the cardinal shrimp. Cardinal shrimp is kind of like the cherry shrimp of Sulawesi. If you're going to try your hands at Sulawesi shrimp, this is the hardiest and most tolerant of them. All of the Sulawesi shrimp are wild caught. It's very, very rare to see somebody selling captive bred, although that's changing. It's been taking a long time for people to figure out how to breed them properly. They tend not to live as long as your crystal reds and cherries, maybe 12 months instead of 18 months. Temperature range. These guys like really warm water. Minimum 81 degrees to keep these guys healthy. They like higher pH, 7.4 to 8.5. Cardinals can be kept in both. Some of the other varieties need to have at least 8.5. The strange thing is they want the water soft. So high alkalinity, soft water, low TDS. Which makes it kind of hard to take care of it. These guys are only 12 to 20 bucks when you buy them. The body itself can turn almost black. These little spots are highly reflective and very beautiful under proper light. And these little white arms are extremely reflective. So when you see them in a tank, it looks almost like a saltwater shrimp. They're just really small versions of saltwater shrimp. So here's kind of a bad video, but a video nonetheless showing a bunch of baby cardinal shrimp picking away at the rocks. You can see the little light flashes there at the arms and how their bodies sort of blend into the shadows.
Is this yours?
No, these are from Lee at SCAPE. So part of the thing of what people do to get some of these shrimp is, other than cardinals, you're not going to find them very often, is generally there's group buys in certain message boards. So people will buy them and import in bags of 50 each from wild-caught stock. And then basically what you do is you expect to lose at least half of those in the first week, just due to the trauma from the stress of shipping and the wild parasites that they have. And then the hope is they'll breed one or two times before the adults die, and then going forward, your offspring should be healthy and be able to reproduce in the water. The hardest, or one of the hardest, yet most in demand Sulawesi is this guy here, the harlequin shrimp. So this guy is one of the ones that needs 8.5 pH water. Now, there is a way of making this water. There's a company out there that makes a product called salty shrimp. And they make two different types of salty shrimp, 7.4 pH and the 8.5 pH. They went out to the lakes where these guys came from. They did a comprehensive analysis of the water, and the salty shrimp mix contains all the minerals that are in the wild water. To mix it though, you have to actually boil the water and mix it in to get everything to dissolve properly. But a lot of people import that in from Germany and use that to take care of these guys. Another one here is red banded shrimp. It's kind of like peppermint saltwater shrimp. Again, this guy likes the 8.5 pH. White orchid shrimp, these are pretty common. In fact, Christian has offered these in the past through Bob's Tropical Plants. I'm not sure which lake for sure these guys come from, but I believe these also prefer the higher pH water conditions. A red orchid, red body instead of white.
One question.
Yeah.
You mean temperature range, you mean 61 degrees, not 81? 81.
That's my bad, I missed that. That's just a typo. Ignore it, I forgot to change it. Water temperature for all of these are going to be minimums at 81 degrees. Minimum for any Sulawesi is going to be 81 degrees.
Get rid of ideal temperature.
I will, I told you it's a mistake.
Okay.
First time doing a presentation, come on. And I'm trying to go forward. Misapi shrimp, these come from, I believe, Lake Misapi. So a different lake, I'm not sure which pH these guys require for sure. Poso blue come from Lake Poso. Now these guys are interesting because they're filter feeders. Most of your filter feeding shrimp are going to find a place in your tank with high current. They're going to stand there and stick their hands out and try to catch the debris getting blown into their hands. Posos are different. I've got a video here, let's see if it plays. That's how they do it. They create their own current. Again, thanks to Lee for this video. So, very different than your other filter feeders. Insanely fast little guys. Some of the other examples of Sulawesi shrimp that are on the market if you import them. Again, you're almost never going to find anything but cardinals in stores, and you'll rarely find anything except for cardinals online, even in Aquabid and places like that. So any questions on Sulawesi before we get to the final end section here?
Has anybody had success breeding anything other than the cardinals?
Lee has. I know Lee specifically has. He's sold off some of his like F2s. But other than that, I personally haven't seen captive bred Sulawesi for sale other than from Lee.
I've seen a few before.
Okay, so Christian says he's seen them a few times. But it's not something you can go out today and find. You're going to have to keep your eye on Aquabid or wherever and keep looking. Okay, so other shrimp. These are where all the shrimp go that don't fit into those other categories. I'm just going to hit on the main ones here. First one is the Amano shrimp. Again, Nature and Aquarium World has introduced this shrimp to the United States. This guy is also sometimes referred to as a cockroach. They are larval breeders. They need brackish water, so they won't reproduce like cherries, but they're pretty darn bulletproof. They're also much larger. Online, I've seen them say they get up to about 2.1 inches. I've had females get up to almost 3. So they can get quite large, which means they're a lot safer in a community tank. You don't have to worry so much about other fish trying to eat them. They're super hardy. They take a wide range of conditions. They're really good, if you don't feed your shrimp, they're really good at eating hair algae and some of the other types of algae. They also have probably the most personality out of any of these shrimps. They're bullies. They're afraid of nothing. I have them in a tank. I've got goldfish. I've got large guppies. I put flake food in there. He will swim amongst them and grab the food. I have seen him grab food out of the mouth of another fish, and then he'll run away and take it. You can keep them with some of the other dwarf shrimp, although they tend to bully them. So they also have a tendency where the other dwarf shrimp will sort of swarm a piece of food and all sit there sort of eating a little wafer or whatever it is. Amanos have a tendency to pick that wafer up and swim away from the other shrimp. So just something to keep in mind with these guys. But these are also another great starter shrimp, great for community tanks. Really nice, fun guys. Red-nosed shrimp. These used to be super popular. They've disappeared. It's really hard to find now. These used to be really popular 2-3 years ago. Again, they're larval breeders, so you can't breed them. They're small, just a little bit bigger than cherries. They've got a nice big red rostrum. Sometimes they're called Pinocchio shrimp. These also like to eat hair algae, so there's something good to throw in your tank where you've got some hair algae going on. Lake. Malawa shrimp. These actually come from Sulawesi, but they come from the rivers. Online, everyone says they like hard water. I have had my best luck breeding these guys in crystal red conditions. They absolutely thrive in my crystal red tanks. Not so much my harbor water tanks, but to be fair, those harbor water tanks have lots of fish in them. I haven't put them in my dedicated shrimp tanks. They're a lot smaller. They're about half the size of your typical cherry shrimp. But generally considered hardy, and they're considered primarily algae eaters. Ninja shrimp. People buy these from the name, Ninja. They're expensive. They go for about 10, 15 bucks a piece. Again, they're larval breeders, so you're not going to be breeding them again. These guys love hard water. So if you're using tap water here in Southern California, they'll do great in it. Throw them into your crystal red shrimp, they'll die. So another nice starter shrimp as long as you don't mind buying them every 12 to 18 months. They're called ninjas because they change color. So they will change colors in just a heartbeat from one color to the next. And I have not yet seen an explanation of how they achieve it. Babaluti green. So the term babaluti has been applied to basically any shrimp out of India that hasn't been properly classified. So they're all considered Caridina, CF, babaluti, until such time that they actually get a true name assigned to them. With the babaluti shrimp, you can sometimes mix a different babaluti and they won't crossbreed. Check with who you're getting them from to find out if they'll crossbreed with what you've already got. These guys, again, prefer harder water. They tend to be very hardy, so it's another good starter shrimp. The one problem with these guys is they're super sensitive to phosphate. So if you're using any sort of phosphate-based buffers, or you've got baby fish in the tank and you put too much food in there, they will die from the phosphate poisoning. It takes about a month or two. Instead of being green, they'll turn orange, and then they'll slowly die off. I lost about 50 that way. I was using a phosphate-based buffer. Everyone said, oh no, phosphates are fine. Got rid of the phosphates, they're doing okay now. Just got a few more for Christian to help fill out a few remaining stripers. Generally about $3. Babaluti stripes, these are pretty new, kind of like a tiger shrimp. Some of them, the stripes are really deep and dark, some of them aren't, but it's a nice white body with black stripes. I like these guys. These guys are really hardy and don't seem to be as sensitive to phosphates as the greens do. And they supposedly won't crossbreed with babaluti greens. Bamboo shrimp. This is one of the few shrimp, other than Amanas, you'll actually see in Petco and PetSmart and places like that. Ooh, what's that too?
President.
Sometimes they're called grass shrimp, fan shrimp, wood shrimp, all sorts of different names. They're pretty big. You can get up to about 2.5 inches in size, maybe even bigger. They're filter feeders. They're fine in tap water, they're not good in new tanks. If you put them in a new tank, there's not enough life living in that tank to survive. Put them in a tank that's been established for a while, they'll find a spot where the filter and the current is strong and they'll just sit there fanning out the water. If you don't have enough filtration in the, or enough current in the tank, they'll actually use their little hands and they'll pick food up off the substrate. So either way, but they prefer to pull it out of the water. They will escape your tank. If you don't have a lid on there, especially if the current is up at the surface from your lily pipes or from your hop filter, they'll sort of hang off the edge of the top of the tank to get into that current, and then they'll decide to climb over the side and see if there's better eatings on the other side. You'll find them 2 rooms over, dead. Amanas also are escape artists, so occasionally will come out of the tank. Vampire shrimp. This is one of my favorite shrimp because they're so badass. They sound all scary being called vampires, but they're filter feeders. These guys normally go for about 12, 15 bucks. 7 to 9 there online. 12, 15 is what I've seen for in stores. Again, they're filter feeders. They're pretty large size. They're purple to white in color. The more white they get, generally, the more stressed they are. Some of them are sort of a bluish tint instead of a purple tint. These guys tend to be kind of shy when it comes from people. They'll try to hang out in the dark corner and filter feed. I've had them in tanks with CPO, dwarf crayfish. They'll kick the dwarf crayfish's butt. They'll put their little fans together and just thwack them on the top of the head over and over again until the crayfish leaves them alone. Sun-kissed orange. These are really common in stores. Again, they're larval breeders, so you won't be reproducing them. They're a nice orange color. They're a nice hardy shrimp. They survive in brackish water good. So if you get a brackish tank, I have these in a brackish tank. The problem with these is you buy them, then they'll turn brown. Or in my case, so it seems like no one knows for sure which is the proper scientific name for this particular species. It will not crossbreed into your crystals. It likes crystal type water parameters. So they're good shrimp to mix into your crystals. They're a little bit smaller than crystals. The females will be this sort of dark blue to a dark brown color, and the males will be more transparent and small. Sometimes the males will get this color, but most of them are more like this. done. Okay, first question.
We were at Pet Expo, I think I saw your custom tanks.
Yeah, and the beer dispenser tank.
You had some really nice orange shrimp in those, and what were those variety?
If it was the beer dispenser tank,
Yeah, the big beer,
those were probably pumpkins. It's been a while.
yeah, but those are nice displays to stadium, right?
Yeah.
If you want to see that tank, it's at Taiwan Bees in Winter Park, is it? Garden Grove? Garden Grove, down by Disneyland. However, they managed to kill all the shrimp. But the plants are still there, and it's still a nice, beautiful beer dispenser. Any other questions? Over here.
I have the bamboo shrimp, and there seems to always be pregnant.
Okay, so yes. So when you're dealing with the monos and bamboo and these other larval breeders, they will still vary up. Even if there's no males, they will still vary up, the females. And then they'll drop the eggs after a certain amount of time. In the case of the bamboo shrimp or the amados, if you do have a male in there, it will release the zoe or the larva into the water. It's just they'll die off really quickly because they don't have access to the brackish water, so they won't actually reproduce. From my experience, just from reading online, most people cannot pull it off. They require different levels of salinity at different stages, and they require different temperatures. Generally, the ocean is cooler than the streams, or vice versa, depending on where you're from. So, if you Google it, you can find some people that have tried. Very few have successfully been able to get amados or bamboo shrimp to fully, completely do a full life cycle in a controlled environment. Some have, though. So you might be able to pull it off if you're willing to put the effort in. Anything else? Yes, sir.
I've noticed with amanos that unless you have a really big tank, it seems that there can be only one. You'll start out with a few, and eventually, at least in my case, it ends up being one, or maybe one at each end of the tank.
Okay, so what he's saying is, in his experience, the amados tend to outcompete each other and generally only end up with a couple, even if you start off with a lot. I haven't had that experience. I've had 3 of them, 3 nice big ones in a 10-gallon tank, and they lasted forever. So that's not been my experience, but and maybe there's not enough food. Like I said, they'll bully you. So if you don't have enough algae in there for them to eat, and one of them's cannibalizing all the food or hogging it all for himself, it might very well be possible. Or maybe I've just been lucky.
Damn shrimp.
Yes, sir.
Like Japan and Germany,
Japan pays the most money. That's where you make your money, is selling to Japanese people. But the breeding and the new strains these days is Taiwan and Germany. Japan doesn't say, Japan sort of says, hey, look, we patented crystal red shrimp. That's good enough for us. Yes? I haven't seen, it may be popular in France. I know there's a yellow lily coming out of Italy. But we don't see those, at least I have not seen those being imported into the United States. And from checking the blogs, anytime they're talking about new shrimp, it's almost always Taiwan, Fu shrimp in China, or Germany, or the good region for it. Anything else? Last question. We've got to get the auction going. Okay, we're done. Thanks, guys.